We must discuss note-taking as part of enhancing our reading comprehension. I've already explained why talking to the text and taking annotations is crucial. Not only does it keep you actively focused on reading, but what you're reading is retained in your memory way better than not taking any annotations. Today I will talk more about note-taking, just a little bit more complex than the annotations. So why take notes? I think the three main reasons are: it maintains our focus, keeps us on track, keeps us from falling asleep. It's hard to fall asleep if your mind is actively thinking and asking questions and we are writing, your pencil's moving. Also, it improves our memory of the material. We're thinking about it with that dialogue that's going on in our head. Plus, we are writing keynotes down, makes it a double whammy for our memory. Also, it's a great study guide. Very important as you are learning new material that you need for a test, or you're learning how to do something for self-improvement or a new skill. Taking great notes means you have a great condensed study guide. Who wants to go back and read the entire text again? No one, right? Instead, you have your own built-in study guide. Of course, you could always refer back to the original source, but that wouldn't have to be very often. Let me give you the definition of repetition. Repetition, the act of repeating, repeated action, repeating, over and over, multiple times, repetitiously, repeatedly. I think you get the picture, right? Well, repetition is the mother of learning. Have you ever memorized a song? Learn how to shoot a free throw? Teach a dog a new trick? Or getting ready for a test? Repetition is key. The more we interact with a particular knowledge, the more we retain that knowledge. We're going to look at a graph that shows that.
A graph called the rate of forgetting, which comes from research by a German statistician named Hermann Ebbinghaus. And what this data shows is that with any type of information, after our initial interaction with that information, our retention of that is going to go down to 60, 50, 40, even down to 30% retention from where we initially started, which is pretty bad news. Except that with a first repetition of that material, we can bump our retention all the way back up to close to 100%, and then it's going to go down even slower than it did before. And as it starts to fade away in our brain again, we can bump it up with a second repetition, and then continue bumping it up with a third, fourth, and fifth repetition where that level of retention stays really high. So why this is good news is that if you had a test, say right here around day 8, if all you had was your initial interaction with that material, you would expect to have less than 40% retention, and you would probably expect to fail that test. But if we had gone back and gotten a first repetition of that information, then our retention is significantly higher, although it's still below 60%. But with the second repetition, now I'm up above 70%, I would expect to pass that test. And if I had even gotten a third repetition, my retention level is above 90%, I would probably have enough knowledge to make an A on that test. So that kid that sits with you in your pre-AP or honors class that always makes good grades, it's not just because they're smarter than you, it's because they figured out how to get multiple repetitions of the material.
Well, how do you take notes? There are varying styles or techniques for taking notes, and the style of note-taking that you prefer will dictate how you take notes. When you are listening to a lecture, you must capture ideas down that are of key importance. But you have to do this pretty quickly or you lose your attention on that lecture. I really wish students who want to take lengthy notes just would not do that during a lecture, because then they're not focused. They're not really listening to the lecture, and they're missing out on their thought processes. So your system of note-taking has to be efficient and effective if you're going to take notes. Usually when reading or listening to words, there are signal words that in a way are saying, hey, pay attention to what comes next. Briefly, here are some signal words to look within your text or when listening. That quote signal to you that important or key information is about to take place. When they give an introduction or background information, when you're given a definition, when there's a list or examples or a clarification or explanation, when the text or the lecturer moves on or changes direction, that's a key signal. When further information is given, things are classified, or there's a reference to a visual, or conclusions is kind of like a summary. So those are all signals to you that, hey, here's some important key information. Well, what is the best note-taking style? As I said before, there are varying styles or techniques for taking notes. I feel that note-taking must involve these elements. And number one, quick. It's got to be quick. You don't want note-taking to bog you down while you're reading. Plus, if it takes forever to take notes, you'll be more likely to give up pretty quickly. Short and quick will make the difference in you sticking to it. Number two, efficient. Has to work well. If you don't take efficient notes and you're trying to learn from them, but then you don't learn from them, what's the point? The third element, I believe, is it must be easy to implement. If it's easy to implement, you'll see the benefits and you'll keep on doing it. If it's a difficult process, you're not going to keep up with the program, you're going to give up, and you just won't keep doing it. So those three are very important when you're taking notes. When reading, which is the focus of this course, I would encourage you not to take these lengthy notes, but really stick to reading a section at a time. And then when you do that retelling part, when you look away from that section at a time, that's when you take your notes. I mean, if you are constantly reading something and taking notes, my goodness, that just takes away from your reading. Certainly don't highlight everything or underline everything. Again, that just takes away from your thinking. And don't write down complete sentences. Just use phrases. You've really got to think the information through. So that's, in my opinion, more important than stopping to write down notes. I mean, you're going through that thought process. So when you do write notes down, the concepts have way more significance to you. See, you are recalling the information, which is really practicing remembering. And that's how it becomes a part of you. That was a real nugget right there. You should write that one down. Let me repeat that. When you are recalling the information, which is really practicing remembering, that's how it becomes a part of you. Again, if you don't get anything else from this video, get this. When it comes to reading, don't read a sentence, stop, go over and write that sentence down. That's just not helpful. It's read, think, and then write. I will show you some of the best note-taking examples I know of. But remember, there are 3 key questions I talked about earlier, and those that you can also put down on paper. And they were, how can I use this? Why must I use this? And when will I use this? Incorporate these 3 key questions into your note-taking. And I teach this one style of notes and we will incorporate these 3 questions into this style of note-taking. The best style, in my opinion, that keeps the elements of quick, efficient, and easy to implement are called Cornell Notes. And it really doesn't matter the name of the style, it's just getting to understand this style. And I put these as R. So R number 1 is for record. You record, and that's in the notes section, which is the large block on the right. Again, this type of note taking is called Cornell Notes. It's great for lecture style class, or you can use when reading a complicated text. Now look how the paper is set up. You simply draw a line almost to the bottom of your paper with about 1/4 of space left there at the bottom. Now the line is not drawn straight down the center. You can see that the majority of the writing space, or the large chunk, is to the right. And here's where you jot down facts, dates, and other possible important information. And you would do this during a class lecture or while you're reading a complicated text or even during discussion. Make bullets, phrases, pictures. Do not do full sentences, definitely not paragraphs. And again, incorporate your symbols and abbreviations and leave space between points because you may want to be coming back later and adding some extra information there. If you record the learning in this type of method, it'll be more meaningful to you. This section, which I call R number 2, is reduce. And that's in the left column. It's the smaller section on the paper. Here's where you write possible test questions or more questions. You can draw helpful little pictures or charts, list vocabulary words, or just note important concepts. So that you're reducing learning to the essential facts and ideas. You would write just simple facts, key ideas, important words, pivotal phrases, and questions here. So you can't recall everything, and you don't need to, so you've got to filter out the most important ideas, concepts, and questions and put those down. The third section is where you will write a summary about the lesson in the summary section at the bottom of the page. And this is our third R for reflect, because you are putting it all together, really, the main ideas from the lesson or the reading. And here's where you might get into more of longer phrases or even complete sentences if you want to. But it's why this information is important, what conclusions can I make from this information, how will I be using it, or how could it be applied to my life. You don't want to forget to do this step because it's one of the best research-based strategies for that long-term retention of any content or skill. And also I'm going to throw in 2 other R's for you right now. So I'd say R number 4 is to recite. So you could just take this paper and kind of cover up step 1 part and look through step 2 and use the questions that you've written there, the vocabulary or concepts to kind of quiz yourself on the content. Then you can of course unfold it or just look back at your notes to see how well you did. And the 5th R is to review. Review this note sheet. Notice it's only on 1 sheet of paper. We're not taking pages and pages of notes. But you would review this once a week just to keep it in your memory and to familiarize yourself with the material, again, for that long-term memory. Here is an example of a blank template. Make sure you would always put your date or what you're reading at the top as well, the information you would want to keep. Here is an example of one that has been completed. Again, it's on 1 sheet of paper. You see on the right-hand side is where the more of the details are, but again, they're bullet points, short words or phrases. And on the left-hand side, they have the key themes and concepts, important words, and key techniques. And at the bottom is now a summary of the entire text. Here's one more example. You see some drawings in there as well. I've seen a lot of my students do lots of little drawings because sometimes pictures can say more than words. Again, Cornell Notes is the style that I teach. And as we stated before, repetitions are huge. And see, with Cornell Notes, you can get up to 10 repetitions. The more quality repetitions you have equals more learning and a deeper comprehension.